I paid rent for my brother and his fiancée because I believed family should lift each other up. But I had no idea they were laughing behind my back, calling me their personal wallet. That's where my story begins. I'm Rowan Hale, 28 years old, the quiet, dependable one in my family. I work hard, I keep to myself, and I've always been the person everyone knew they could count on. It wasn't something I did for praise, it was just who I was. My younger brother, Dax, has always been different from me. He's 26, charismatic, and effortless in the way people gravitate toward him. But with that charm came irresponsibility. He jumped from job to job, made promises he never kept, and always had a story to cover his tracks. Still, he was my brother, and I loved him. I always believed that one day he'd finally grow up. Then there was Mara Kittredge, Dax's fiancée. She was 25, beautiful, soft-spoken in public, and always perfectly put together. But around me there was this coldness. Little things, a tight-lipped smile, a sigh when I walked in, a comment that sounded polite but wasn't. I ignored all of it because I wanted to support Dax's future. Everything changed the day I got a panicked call from him. He told me he had lost his job, that he and Mara were facing eviction, that the bills were months behind. He sounded scared, defeated, and desperate. Without thinking twice, I drove over and assured him I'd help. I took over their rent that month. And then the next. Then the next. Groceries, utilities, gas money, anything they claimed they needed. I didn't question them. I didn't ask for proof. I just believed them. I truly thought I was helping them get back on their feet. I felt proud that I could keep them afloat during a hard time. Whenever someone asked why I was doing so much, I would say, they're trying. They just need support right now. But over the months, things started to feel strange. I'd walk into their apartment and feel like the air had shifted. Conversations stopped when I stepped inside. Dax and Mara shared glances I couldn't read. Sometimes I sensed tension or heard quick whispers behind closed doors. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was overthinking. Then one evening, everything changed. I arrived early with groceries, planning to stock their fridge before heading to work. Their front door was slightly open. I stepped closer and heard their voices, laughing relaxed. I smiled at first, thinking maybe they were finally feeling better. Then I heard my name. Not gently, not with gratitude, but with mockery. I froze in the hallway, gripping the grocery bags as their words floated out, sharp, cruel, and completely unexpected. Words I wasn't prepared to hear. Words I couldn't make sense of. And in that moment, standing alone with the bags cutting into my fingers, I felt something inside me fracture, an ache I didn't yet know how to face. When I heard Dax and Mara laughing about me, it felt like the floor dropped beneath my feet. I stood there, silent, holding the grocery bags I had brought for them, and listened as my own brother joked that I had jumped on the chance to pay our bills like a desperate fool. Mara laughed and added that I was useful, pathetic, and practically their ATM. Those words cut straight through me. I wanted to walk in and scream, or at least ask them why they would say something so cruel after everything I had done for them. But I didn't move. I kept standing there, frozen, trying to understand how the people I trusted could talk about me like that. When I finally stepped inside, they pretended nothing had happened. I forced myself to smile back and act normal, even though I felt sick inside. After that day, something in me changed. I couldn't look at them the same way anymore. I started paying attention to everything they said and did. I noticed how Dax talked about being so stressed from job hunting, but somehow he always had time to go out with his friends. I saw Mara wearing new clothes even though she had told me she was cutting back on everything. Small things began to add up, and every time they did, my stomach tightened. I remembered how Dax said he lost his job suddenly, but then I overheard him talking on the phone about quitting because he was tired of dealing with his boss. That didn't match anything he had told me. Mara claimed she barely worked any hours, but her schedule never matched her excuses. Their stories were full of holes, and now that I was looking closely, the lies became clearer. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I didn't want another fake apology or another story made to cover up the last one. I needed the truth. I needed to know how long they had been using me and how deep their betrayal really ran. Every time I went to their apartment, I kept my face calm and my voice steady, acting like I didn't know anything. But inside, I was watching everything, what they bought, what they said, what they tried to hide. It hurt more than anything I had felt in a long time, but I refused to let my emotions control me. If they thought I was useful, then I would use their assumptions to find out the whole truth. I wanted to understand exactly what they were doing behind my back. I wanted to know how far they were willing to go. Their words still echoed in my head, but instead of breaking me, they pushed me towards something stronger. I made a quiet promise to myself that I would not stay blind. I would not let them make a fool out of me again. I was going to uncover everything, no matter how painful it was. I started digging quietly, still pretending everything was normal, but inside I was preparing myself for whatever I might find. I asked small questions here and there, nothing that would make them suspicious. I also paid attention to what they said when they didn't realize I was listening. It didn't take long before the truth slipped out. One afternoon, I ran into someone who used to work with Dax. I casually asked how things were going at the company, and he looked surprised. He told me Dax hadn't been fired at all. He said Dax quit months ago because he didn't want to deal with the workload or follow the new rules. Hearing that made my chest tighten. All the nights I spent worrying about him, all the rent I paid, and he had walked away from his job on purpose. I thanked the man and walked away feeling like someone had slapped me. Then there was Mara. She always acted stressed and claimed she barely worked any shifts. But one day, when I passed by her workplace, I saw her leaving with a coworker. They were talking about how many extra hours she picked up and how much money she was saving. Saving. That word hit me hard. She told me she had no money to contribute to the apartment, but she was clearly working more than she admitted and hiding her earnings. After that, I started noticing their apartment differently. It wasn't just messy. I saw new things each time I visited. Designer shoes lined the closet. Expensive liquor bottles sat on the counter. A new gaming console appeared next to the TV. These weren't things bought by people who were barely surviving. These were luxuries bought with money they swore they didn't have. I felt anger rushing through me every time I spotted something new. But the anger mixed with something worse, humiliation. I had been paying their bills while they shopped and partied. I had skipped things for myself so they wouldn't lose their home, and they used that freedom to treat themselves. It was embarrassing to realize how blind I had been, how easily they had taken advantage of me. But even with all that hurt building inside me, I didn't confront them. I wasn't ready, not yet. I knew if I went to them now, they would deny everything, twist the story, or try to guilt-trip me into looking like the bad guy. I didn't want another lie. I didn't want more excuses. So I stayed quiet. I kept collecting details, little truths that were finally falling into place. I watched, listened, and took mental notes of every new item they bought, every lie they told, every bit of evidence that showed they were using me. I wanted to be sure. I wanted proof, real proof, not just suspicions. I wanted to know exactly how far their betrayal went before I made my next move. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I went to their apartment earlier than usual that day. I had bought groceries on my way home and thought it would be good to drop them off before the food got warm. I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't even thinking about them. I just wanted to do what I always did. Help. When I reached their door, it was slightly open again. I heard their voices inside, talking loudly and freely. I was about to knock when I heard my name. My whole body went still. Mara's voice came first. She sounded annoyed, almost disgusted, as she said, "She's such a burden, honestly. She likes being used. Why else would she keep paying for everything?" I felt something sharp twist inside my chest, but before I could process it, Dax answered. He laughed and said, "Why stop her? She's dumb enough to keep paying. Let her. It makes things easier for us." My heart dropped. I stood there, frozen in the hallway with grocery bags in my hands. The words kept coming, each one hitting harder than the last. Mara said, "We'll keep milking her until the wedding. After that, we don't need her hovering around. She'll get clingy, and I'm not dealing with that." Dax agreed instantly. "Yeah, once the wedding is done, she's cut off. She can figure out her own life for once." They laughed together, like they were discussing something amusing instead of tearing me apart. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to stay quiet, trying not to make a sound. My throat tightened so fast I could barely breathe. I hadn't cried in years, not even during the toughest moments of my life. But hearing their voices so cold, so confident, so sure I would continue to let them walk over me, it broke something in me. Silent tears slid down my face before I could stop them. I stood there crying softly, trying to wipe my cheeks with the back of my hand so the sound wouldn't give me away. Every word they said felt like another cut. I had given them everything I could. I trusted them. I believed their stories. I thought I was helping them rebuild their lives. But they hadn't needed help. They had wanted control. They had wanted someone to use. The pain was so deep it felt physical, like a weight pressing against my chest. I stayed there until they changed the topic, until their voices faded into casual conversation again. Only then did I step away from the door, leaving the groceries on the floor because I couldn't force myself to walk inside. That moment became my breaking point. The betrayal wasn't just hurtful, it was unbearable. I felt the last pieces of trust crumble inside me, leaving only anger and clarity behind. Right there in the hallway, with my eyes still wet, I made myself a promise. I would never let them use me again. I swore I would stop being the victim. After hearing what they really thought of me, I stopped giving them the blind trust one used to. I didn't confront them or show any anger. I knew if I reacted too soon, they would try to twist everything and make me look unreasonable. So I stayed calm on the outside while my mind quietly shifted into a different mode. I started gathering every bit of proof I had. I went through my bank app and screenshotted every transfer I had made for their rent, their groceries, and their utility bills. I pulled up old messages where Dax thanked me for covering something or where Mara asked for money because she had nothing left. I collected receipts from the times I personally bought supplies for their apartment. Every small detail mattered now. I wanted a full record of how much I had done. Then I decided to reach out to their landlord. I made sure to call when I knew Dax and Mara wouldn't be anywhere near the office. I kept my voice polite and acted like I just needed information for my own records. The landlord didn't hesitate to tell me the truth. He explained that they had been months behind on rent long before Dax claimed he lost his job. They had ignored warnings, skipped payments, and even argued with him about late fees. Hearing that shocked me. I thought I stepped in right when things got bad, but the truth was they had been struggling, and lying about it, for far longer than I realized. I felt another wave of hurt, but this time it didn't break me. It pushed me to think clearer. I saw how everything fit together now. Their lies, their mockery, the new things in their apartment, the way they acted so relaxed while I stressed myself trying to help. They had built their comfort on my back, and they thought they could keep doing it until their wedding day. That thought is what made me start planning. I didn't want to scream at them or fight. I wanted something that would expose everything in a way they couldn't deny. Something that would hit where it mattered most. Their sense of control, their pride in front of others, and the future they were planning for themselves. Their wedding was the perfect place for the truth to come out, but I needed to be smart and patient. So I kept playing the role they expected me to. I still visited occasionally, still brought things they asked for, and still nodded along when they talked about the wedding. On the surface, I looked like the same helpful sister who didn't know any better. But on the inside, I was done. Every smile I gave them now had purpose. Every calm response hid the fact that I was preparing to walk away and leave them standing in the mess they created. I was no longer their support system. I was preparing to be their consequences. I stopped paying their bills quietly, without saying a single word to either of them. No warnings, no hints. I simply let the next rent payment date pass. It felt strange at first, like breaking a habit I had been forced into. But once I did it, a strange calm settled over me. I finally felt in control again. Before the payment was due, I called the landlord and told him politely that I would no longer be responsible for anything related to Dax and Mara's apartment. He sounded surprised, but he agreed and updated his records. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders the moment I hung up the phone. For the first time in months, their problems were no longer mine. It didn't take long for things to fall apart for them. Only a few days passed before the landlord delivered a 3-day notice to their door. Dax called me first, his voice already shaking. He kept saying they had gotten some mistake letter and needed me to check what happened with the payment. I kept my voice soft and acted unsure, asking him what he meant. He grew irritated instantly, like he expected me to fix everything right away. Then Mara called. She wasn't pretending to be sweet anymore. She sounded angry and almost offended. She asked why I didn't handle the rent like I always did, as if it was my life's job. I told her I thought Dax said he was taking care of things now. I added just a little confusion to my voice, and that seemed to push her over the edge. They both started panicking. They talked over each other, blaming the landlord, blaming the system, blaming stress, blaming everything except themselves. When that didn't help, they turned on me. They said I was abandoning them. They said I knew they were going through a hard time, and still chose to let them suffer. They made it sound like I owed them something. I stayed calm through all of it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't defend myself, didn't spill any of the truth I had gathered. I simply listened and asked harmless questions, pretending I didn't understand why they were so upset. The more calm I stayed, the more they lost control. Their panic kept growing because this was the first time they actually had to face the consequences of their choices. No backup plan. No money saved. No lies left to hide behind. It became obvious how dependent they had become on me. They weren't worried about losing their home because of responsibilities. They were worried because their safety net had disappeared. Watching them unravel, I finally saw the truth clearly. They weren't helpless. They weren't struggling. They were entitled. They expected me to carry their lives on my shoulders, and when I stepped back, they didn't know how to stand on their own. Their reaction didn't hurt me anymore. It only confirmed everything I already knew. They needed me far more than I ever needed them. The day of the wedding arrived, and I stayed quiet while everything unfolded. I kept my distance, watching, while they went about the usual planning and excitement. I had already decided I wasn't going to be part of their lies anymore. I had all the proof I needed. Recordings of them mocking me, copies of every payment I had made, texts showing their fake struggles, and the truth about Dax quitting his job months ago. It was all there, ready to speak for itself. I showed everything to both families before the ceremony began. I didn't need to explain or argue. The recordings, the bank statements, the messages, they told the story better than I ever could. Faces changed instantly. Shock, confusion, and then anger spread across both sides. People who had believed their stories for months were suddenly looking at them in a completely new light. I could feel the tension tighten like a rope around the room. Mara's parents were the first to react. They pulled back their support for the wedding immediately. They weren't willing to fund an event built on lies, and they made that very clear. Their expressions said more than words ever could: disappointment, frustration, and a sense of betrayal that matched my own. Dax tried to turn the situation in his favor. He came to me privately, anger flashing in his eyes at first, but it quickly shifted into something else. Pleading, manipulation, even guilt-tripping. He said things like, "You don't have to do this, and I thought you'd understand, Rowan." It was all meant to make me feel responsible again, to pull me back into the role I had refused to play. I looked at him calmly and said the words I had been holding back for months. "I'm not your crutch. I'm the sister you betrayed." I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just said it firmly. Every word carried the weight of everything I had done for him and everything he had taken for granted. I let it sink in. He went silent. For the first time, I saw him truly process the reality of what he had done. No excuses, no blame shifting, just the truth standing in front of him. Mara was fuming too, but her parents' withdrawal had left her powerless. The perfect image she had tried to maintain was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I felt a strange sense of relief watching it all. I hadn't needed revenge in the way people think. No shouting, no humiliation. The proof I had collected did the work for me. Both of their families had seen them for who they truly were, and the consequences hit hard. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just exposing them for myself. I was showing everyone around them the truth they had hidden for so long. Their lies, their selfishness, and their dependence on me were now visible to the people who mattered. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I had finally stepped out of the role they had forced me into. After their families learned the truth, things started to fall apart quickly. The wedding venue called to cancel because the payment hadn't been made. Dax and Mara had assumed I would cover it, but now the money wasn't there. Hearing that, I felt no pity, only a quiet satisfaction. They had finally started facing the consequences of their choices. News of their deception spread fast. Friends who had always sided with them began to distance themselves. Invitations were ignored, messages went unanswered, and even casual acquaintances started avoiding them. The circle they had relied on for support was shrinking by the hour. I watched it all unfold from a distance, careful not to get involved but noticing every reaction. Dax and Mara's relationship began to crack under the pressure. Arguments erupted over money, lies, and blame. Mara blamed Dax for assuming I would keep paying, while Dax accused Mara of hiding her earnings and spending freely. They had built their comfort and plans on lies and my support, and now the weight of reality was too much for them to handle together. I stayed out of their fights. I didn't step in to mediate or fix things. I had learned my lesson the hard way. Their problems were theirs to solve. I didn't need to rescue them anymore. It was strange at first, not to be involved, but it was also freeing. I could breathe, think clearly, and focus on myself. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think about my own life. I didn't have to sacrifice my time, money, or energy for people who didn't respect me. I started planning small things for myself, things I had put aside while helping them. I bought things I had wanted, spent time with friends who genuinely cared about me, and focused on work and hobbies I had neglected. Watching Dax and Mara struggle without me made me realize how much I had been giving up for people who didn't deserve it. Their arguments, their humiliation, and the unraveling of their lives reminded me that I was stronger than I had ever known. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. I understood now that my kindness had limits, and it was okay to enforce them. I felt empowered in a way I hadn't before. I knew I had the strength to stand up for myself, to protect myself, and to stop letting others take advantage of me. And while I was moving on with my life, a part of me stayed alert. I knew that if they tried to come back or manipulate me again, I wouldn't let it happen. For the first time, I felt free. I wasn't just surviving their betrayal. I was thriving in spite of it. And even though the chaos they faced was their own making, seeing it made me certain of one thing. I had the power now, and I wasn't done claiming it. After weeks of stress and arguments, Mara finally left Dax. She had discovered that he had been blaming her for everything to save his own pride. Hearing that, I wasn't surprised. He had always found ways to shift responsibility and avoid facing the truth. Mara had finally seen it too, and she didn't want to be part of it anymore. Dax's reaction was immediate and desperate. He started calling me non-stop, leaving messages, begging for help, and trying to guilt me into fixing everything. Every call made my stomach twist, but I ignored them all. I had learned my lesson, and I wasn't going to be pulled back into their lies and manipulation. After a few days of silence, I sent him one message. I kept it simple but firm. I told him that I would no longer rescue people who treated me like a joke. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't explain or argue. I just stated the truth. For once, I refused to take on responsibility for his mistakes. I watched from a distance as Dax's world continued to collapse. Without Mara, without my help, without the money and support he had counted on, he was forced to face reality. Eventually, he packed up and moved back to our parents' place. He arrived empty-handed, broke, and alone. The arrogance and entitlement he had carried for so long were gone, replaced by the consequences of his choices. Seeing him face this reality didn't bring joy, but it brought relief. I no longer had to carry the burden of their mistakes. I didn't have to feel the stress and humiliation of being used while they laughed behind my back. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I reflected on everything that had happened. I had been kind and generous, but I had also been blind to their true nature. I had learned the hard way that sometimes people take advantage of trust and love. But I also learned that I was stronger than I had believed. I could set boundaries, stand firm, and protect myself without guilt. Closing that chapter wasn't easy emotionally, but it was necessary. I felt a sense of clarity and peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I had done what I could, and it was enough. I didn't need to rescue anyone who refused to take responsibility for themselves. The final blow wasn't meant to hurt Dax. It was meant to set me free. I had removed myself from the chaos, refused to be manipulated again, and watched as the truth finally caught up to him. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my life. I didn't carry anger or regret anymore. I had a clean conscience. I had learned my value, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me doubt it again. I could move forward stronger, wiser, and finally free from the people who had taken advantage of me. After everything with Dax and Mara, I spent a lot of time thinking about what had happened. I realized how much blind loyalty had cost me. I had given so much of my time, money, and energy to people who didn't respect or appreciate it. I had thought I was helping, but I had actually allowed myself to be used. It was painful to admit, but I needed to understand it fully to move on. Slowly, I started feeling something I hadn't in a long time: self-respect. I understood that it was okay to set limits and say no. I didn't have to sacrifice my well-being for someone else's comfort or lies. I began noticing the difference between helping someone genuinely in need and being taken advantage of. It was a lesson I learned the hard way, but it was powerful. I decided to focus on myself for the first time in years. I signed up for therapy to work through all the anger, hurt, and betrayal I had carried. It helped me understand my feelings and why I had allowed them to take so much from me. I started paying attention to my own happiness, doing things I had put off while constantly supporting them. I spent more time with friends who genuinely cared about me, explored hobbies I had abandoned, and even treated myself to small things that brought joy. Independence became my goal. I wanted to build a life where I could rely on myself first. I didn't want to depend on anyone else for my stability, and I didn't want anyone to rely on me in a way that could harm me. Every small step I took toward this independence felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost for too long. Looking back, I realized betrayal hadn't broken me. It had revealed my strength. It showed me what I was capable of, how much I could endure, and how clearly I could see people for who they really were. I wasn't vengeful anymore. I didn't feel the need to punish anyone. The lesson was already learned, and the justice I needed had come naturally through their own actions. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from manipulation, free from lies, and free from the guilt I had carried for helping people who didn't deserve it. I finally understood that my value didn't come from what I gave others, but from respecting myself and protecting my peace. Betrayal had shown me the truth, but it had also given me a gift, the knowledge that I was strong, capable, and in control of my own life. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, and that freedom was everything.